Welcome to Cargo Film Presents. I'm Dan.
I'm Dave.
On Cargo Film Presents, we review the latest documentary films, and today we're going to be talking about Crip Camp. Crip Camp, which was directed by Jim Lebrecht and Nicole Newnham, looks at the relationship between a radical Catskills summer camp called Camp Jened and the birth of the disability movement in the United States, as well as the community of disability rights advocates who fought and won civil rights first through Section 504 and then later the American Disabilities Act. The film had its world premiere at Sundance Film Festival in 2020. It won the Audience Award. Also of note, Barack and Michelle Obama are executive producers of Crip Camp.
Get out.
Who knew?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is it's I was going to say fine film. It's a terrific film, if only for the fact that it describes a civil rights movement that many people haven't really heard about, and that and that's progress, and that it grants better, more equal rights to people with disabilities, and as importantly, changing the cultural perceptions of people with disability. As importantly, I should say. And that they should, with the pervasive thinking prior to this legislation that, people with disabilities should not be seen or heard, So just for that, I think everybody should watch it and understand that those rights had to be earned and fought for, and they just didn't happen.
You get the call to action, to the barricades.
A small army of the handicapped have occupied this building for the past 11 days.
And it occurred to me while watching this, and this may sound naive, that, it's just incredible how every minority group always has to fight mightily for societal acceptance and change in policy to stop discrimination. It's, I wonder if, we ever get to the point where we're going to be able to, just address the problems and determine change and get them right, rather than having to wage a monumental battle for change. And I'm not sure if that's an American phenomena only. Well, probably not only, certainly, but I just wonder if there are countries out there that, perhaps embrace this change more easily and readily. I'm thinking the Nordic countries for some reason, but,
Right.
So maybe it's not in our DNA necessarily. In any case, these, like for instance, these disability activists had to occupy, a San Francisco government building, essentially living there for 28 days, to protest unfair laws, and then you think of the former president of this country openly mocking a journalist with a disability, and then you remember, all right, yeah, okay, there are still people like that exist. So, the battle continues on certain fronts.
Oh, you're right. Once rights are secured, it's often easy to kind of take them for granted, and I think that's a great, powerful reminder of this film. Seeing disabled people occupying a building, without much in the way of running water, or I think they cut off the air conditioning or something at some point. I mean, it was just horrible how they were trying to just stop, people from just getting equal rights. And I guess it's also worth noting this film, what's unique about it, as well as it's told from the inside out in a way. The director, Jim Lebrecht, it features his personal story. Obviously, he went to Camp Jened. He had spina bifida. So I think it's, one of the first films. I think there have been other films maybe about the movement of disability rights in Section 504, but this is the first film you really get to see it told from the perspective of someone with a disability, and with that perspective that, people with disabilities don't necessarily see their handicap or disability as tragic. For them, I mean, they just want to live the same kind of full, celebratory, joyous life. And often, sometimes, the depictions we see, I think, of disability are often tragic or lonely or anguished and painful. Right. And this film is anything but. It's sort of raucous. Yeah. It's fun. It's full of brimming with life. And that's what's sort of special about it.
Agreed. They're just like everybody else, right? And up until the 60s, I guess part of the problem was that perhaps many people with disabilities were um, forced in one way or another to be passive and accept their second class citizenship. And this story is inspiring because it does present that time when they stopped taking a backseat and demanded to be treated more fairly. It's like what one of the campers at Camp Jeanette says. I don't remember exactly, but had something to do with, how if you have a disability, you have to be bold. You can't be passive. You really have to go out of your way to be seen and heard, and only then, you have a fighting chance at changing society's perceptions of you and your group.
Yeah, yeah, and it's this great, I think, lovely connection that the filmmakers make, between the sort of two parts of the film. The first part being this extraordinary archive of Camp
Hmm.
Jened, I guess that people had forgotten about, maybe, or was it seemed to have been rediscovered recently. The director had rediscovered it, and the connection between that camp and later the disability rights advocates. And what they sort of discovered was that the things that they learned and I guess developed, this sense of community and freedom and community, they later used to apply to getting, rights through Section 504 later on.
Right.
So it's this really nice, connection that's made in the film. So
Yeah.
it isn't just a story of, the disability rights movement. It's really about, these individuals and community that was built at this camp that you later then see, in
Hmm.
action later on out in the world. So it's kind of nice that the camp is a sort of incubator for, not
Correct.
necessarily like, I mean, at the beginning, I suppose it wasn't like a political movement. It was just
No.
about advocating for, visibility, advocating for, not being discriminated against. And, it's sort of wonderful to see, I think, the connection that was made there.
If you don't demand what you believe in for yourself, you're not going to get it.
It is. And it reminded me somewhat of our conversation about the mole agent, and
Yeah.
that, the premise and the title and the marketing, lead you to think it's all about the camp and all and what happens at the camp. And then you discover that, yeah, many of the alumni become part of the policy changes that swept the nation in the 70s. And most of the film, the meat of the film, is actually the actual work done to change that policy that started in San Francisco. Yeah, I think it's an interesting, I don't know if it's a trend in docs, but we're seeing this packaging and selling of a catchy premise and delivery. Another story, certainly this one is, as you said, very nicely is connected to that original premise, and that, the seeds of that movement seem to have started there. And it's great, hey, whatever gets people to watch good docs, I'm all for it.
That's right. They hook you in with,
Yeah,
sex, drugs, and rock and
that's right.
roll at
That's
the
right.
summer camp, and
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
to tell you an important story about a social issue, that
Yeah.
maybe doesn't get as much attention. So yeah, maybe that is the new kind of method of doc filmmakers these days.
Sure.
But,
Why not? I thought it was also an interesting choice, not to make to make the film about the movement, and certainly with the starting at the camp and so on. It could have easily have morphed into a biography film about Judy Heumann. She was certainly the face of the movement in the 70s, and prominent throughout in changing the policy, even up till I understand, being part of Barack Obama's administration, where she had a role. So she's clearly the ringleader throughout most of this. She's just amazing, right? As just a personality, articulating the cause again and again to the media, to politicians, to whoever wants to listen, and keeping the community of activists together through thick and thin. It's just a real force of nature and a fascinating personality. So she's featured prominently, and the film sets out to document this as a whole movement with many contributors, and indeed there were. But it makes you wonder whether the filmmakers at some point might have thought, oh, should we make this kind of like an RPG, with Judy as that person. And I'm not saying it's better or worse. I did think that, that could have been a choice the filmmakers could have gone with.
No, you're right. You're right. And I mean, yeah, Judy really is the engine of the film, and it's just, yeah, those nice connections. You see her at the camp. I'm not sure if she was a counselor or
No,
just a camper.
well, that's interesting. I'm not sure. I mean,
Because she's organizing, I guess meals at some point
Right.
for lasagna, and then you see her
Right.
like later organizing the sit-in,
Yeah.
the occupation of the government building in San Francisco. And
Yeah,
you're
it
like,
sounded
wow,
very, very familiar. Yeah. I
just
know.
the
Well, no, I
energy.
think she was a camper there. I mean, because she also talked about, how she used to have makeout sessions with other campers and so
Right,
on.
you're right,
So,
yeah.
right. Anyway, I also want to highlight this really terrific scene of, I think they were going up a bunch of people with disabilities in wheelchairs and other disabilities going up the steps of the Capitol in DC. There's some really terrific footage of young people and old who get out of their wheelchairs and or their crutches and so on, and just struggle to get up to the steps of the Capitol to make an impression there with policymakers. And it's at least to me, just the most dramatic scene. It's such a great metaphor for the whole thing, the whole story of these people, working so hard to make change. Do you remember the scene I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, that was a really powerful, moving sequence. And you're also just struck that the American Disabilities Act that they ultimately managed to pass was under the first George Bush, I guess. And you're like,
Yep.
wow. Okay. And then as you mentioned, we had our former president mocking people with disabilities, and like, wow. Sometimes in hindsight, you're just surprised that certain political changes happen under administrations that you wouldn't expect. So
two steps forward, one step back.
Yep.
As it goes.
There's one scene earlier in the film when they're at Camp Jeanette, and they're all talking about what it's like.
The world always wants us dead. We live with that reality.
At the time, so many kids just like me were being sent to institutions.
To have disabilities, how their families, the campers are talking about, how their families treat them, if they treat them differently from their siblings. And at one point, there's a woman, I think Nancy, with cerebral palsy, and she's struggling to speak and struggling to get her perspective out. And it's just remarkable that both the film and all of the campers, they sort of wait and they allow her to finally make her contribution to the conversation. And it's incredibly a powerful, I thought, a really powerful scene too. And just a reminder of the need to listen, particularly in these kind of political movements or movements of social change. Often everyone just wants to like get their point of view out there, whether it's on Twitter or whatever. And, this space for dialogue and conversation that you see in the camp, and then you obviously see later on, within the disability rights movement, it's just this real compassion and care for like everyone, just like the idea that, we need to take care of everyone. We need to listen to everyone. And in that way, we're able to gain our freedom, our individual freedom. And in the case, what, the point Nancy was raising, the right to privacy as well as a disabled person, which I think is a real, is a real challenge within that community is, oftentimes their privacy is not respected by outsiders or, people who are caring for them or treating them.
Agreed. Time and again, I was just, impressed with the kind of space they allowed for people to participate and contribute, and beyond just the movement itself, just society at large. A lesson we can all learn to be able to be a bit more compassionate and allow for different voices and different ways of communicating, and just being patient and compassionate. Would be something we would all benefit from. But yeah, I was struck by that as well, that they were so accommodating.
So what do we think? Is it gonna?
Yeah,
get
well,
nominated?
listen,
Is it gonna
you
make
know
the
what?
top
I think,
five?
I suppose that it will, it's got a good shot, no doubt, especially with Barack and Michelle's backing. It certainly has a shot. And, I can't say really anything bad about this film. I think it's well made. It's got a great story, and it's got and as I said off the top, it's something I think most people should watch, and because you'd gain an instant appreciation for, people with disabilities or people with differences in general, so it's doing good work out there. So I think it's got a real shot at getting nominated. Whether it will win or not, well, that remains. We can have that conversation later.
Yeah, we got to get to the
Yeah.
nominations, I guess, at some point soon. But yes, likewise, I'd like to see it, in the nominations. I think it would be an important, powerful statement. I mean,
Yeah.
just not only the issue, but it is really a kind of beautifully made film.
Mhm.
From it satisfies, I think, yeah, like you said, it's got a great story. So if you're looking for that, if you love sort of documentary films, it does have this unique art, kind of archive that was unearthed.
Yeah.
And special shout out to those guys too, who the filmmakers who came in to film Camp Jeanette in the 70s. I mean,
Right.
they're, we've seen, I guess, in the past, filmmakers maybe not respecting communities, but the way in which they just, again, allowed the campers to, have their space and have their voice. Like there was just such
Yeah.
an innocence to that relationship, and the openness with which the campers, presented themselves on camera, and the relationship they had with the crew that was there at the time.
Yeah, good people. And I also thought of, it was a pity that was it Larry Ellison, the person, the individual running the camp, who seems interesting and charismatic and personable in some of that footage. It's a pity that they didn't have additional footage on him. I'd love to have learned a little bit more about him. He seemed like a great guy as well.
Yeah. Also with a great sense of humor.
Yeah,
Seemed like in the
he's
film.
got definitely he's got the best joke in the film, probably.
We both highly recommend you check out Crip Camp. It is on Netflix, so go and check it out. We'll see you next time.
All right, see you later.